Babylon, 323 BC. A man lies in a palace, dying. He is 32 years old. In 13 years, he has conquered an empire stretching from Greece to India, the largest the world had ever seen. His generals stand around his bed. They ask, "To whom do you leave your empire?" He is said to have answered, "To the strongest." Then he dies. No one knows why. Poison? Typhoid? Alcohol? Or did someone in that room help things along? That is the final question in the life of Alexander the Great. But it fits his entire life perfectly. Brilliant, brutal, and, to this day, not fully explained. The boy who descended from gods. Alexander is born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedonia. His father, Philip II, one of the most capable military strategists of his time. His mother, Olympias, a princess from Epirus. Olympias is not an ordinary woman. She is deeply religious, almost fanatical. From the time Alexander can walk, she tells him, "You are not an ordinary person. Your real father is Zeus." Whether she believes it, or whether it's political calculation, no one knows. But Alexander believes it. Or he learns to act as if he does, so convincingly that eventually the difference stops mattering. His father, Philip, recognizes early, this boy needs the best teacher in the world. So he writes a letter to Aristotle. Aristotle, student of Plato, the sharpest mind of his generation, travels to Macedonia and teaches Alexander for 3 years. Philosophy, medicine, rhetoric, biology, politics. Alexander is not a passive student. He argues, contradicts, asks questions Aristotle doesn't expect. He later says, "To my father I owe my life. To Aristotle, the life worth living." At 16, he commands an army for the first time, standing in for his father. He wins. At 18, he fights at the decisive Battle of Chaeronea, which brings all of Greece under Macedonian control. Wins. At 20, he becomes king because his father is murdered. And some historians believe to this day, Alexander knew it was coming. Philip II is assassinated in 336 BC at a wedding celebration. The killer, a bodyguard named Pausanias. He is killed immediately before he can speak. The question that historians still debate: who was behind it? Olympias, Alexander's mother, had a motive. Philip had cast her aside and married another woman. That woman's child would have threatened Alexander's claim to the throne. Alexander had a motive. He didn't want to wait. There is no proof. But what Alexander does in his first weeks as king speaks for itself. He has every potential rival executed. Cousins, half-brothers, anyone who might theoretically claim the throne. In the ancient world, this wasn't unusual. It was power politics. But the speed and coldness with which Alexander moves makes one thing clear. This man does not hesitate. Then Greece stirs. Thebes revolts, believing Alexander is too young and inexperienced to respond. Alexander marches from Macedonia to Thebes in 2 weeks. He levels the city to the ground. 30,000 people are enslaved. Of Thebes, only the temples remain and the house of the poet Pindar. All of Greece watches and goes silent. In 334 BC, Alexander crosses the Hellespont with 37,000 soldiers, the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia. He wants to destroy the Persian Empire, the most powerful empire in the known world. Area, nearly 3 million square miles. Population, an estimated 50 million people. Alexander's army, 37,000 men. What follows is still studied at military academies today. At the Battle of Granicus, he defeats a numerically superior Persian force with an unexpected cavalry charge directly into their center. At the Battle of Issus in 333 BC, he faces Darius III, the Persian king himself, for the first time. Darius flees and leaves his family behind. Mother, wife, daughters. Alexander treats them with full royal respect. He sends word, "Nothing will happen to you." That is not just generosity, that is strategy. Because Alexander doesn't just want to defeat Persia, he wants to take it over. He wants to be accepted as its legitimate ruler, not as a conqueror. He moves on. Egypt falls without a fight. The Egyptians welcome him as a liberator from Persian rule. The priests declare him the son of the god Amun. Alexander smiles. He expected this. He founds Alexandria, a city that carries his name. Of the more than 70 cities he founds, this one becomes the greatest. To this day, Alexandria is one of the largest cities in Africa. 331 BC, the decisive Battle of Gaugamela. Darius has assembled a massive army, an estimated 250,000 men. He has had the battlefield leveled so his chariots have room to run. Alexander sees this and strikes exactly where Darius doesn't expect it. He rides personally into the gap that opens in the Persian line, straight toward Darius. Darius flees again. Shortly after, he is murdered by his own men. The Persian Empire, 200 years old, the greatest power in the world, has fallen. Alexander is 25 years old. Alexander pushes further. Central Asia, Bactria, Sogdia. He marries Roxana, a Bactrian princess, a political marriage, but contemporaries report he loves her. But the further the campaign goes, the more Alexander changes. He adopts Persian clothing, Persian court ceremonies. He demands that his Greek officers prostrate themselves before him, the so-called proskinesis, a Persian gesture of total submission. For Greeks and Macedonians, this is a humiliation. You bow only before gods, not before men. The tension in his army grows. 327 BC, an evening in a tent in Bactria. Alexander is drinking, a lot. His old friend Cleitus, the man who had once saved his life in battle, makes remarks about Alexander's behavior, the submission rituals, the Persian clothing, the way Alexander is drifting from his roots. Alexander reaches for a spear and drives it into Cleitus's chest. Cleitus dies instantly. What happens next is almost as revealing as the act itself. Alexander collapses. He weeps for days. He refuses food and water. His officers have to talk him into continuing. He is not a cold-blooded killer, but he is a man who cannot be controlled when drunk. And when a man like that controls an army, he becomes more dangerous than any enemy. 326 BC. Alexander's army crosses the Indus River. They are now in a world no Greek has ever entered. At the Hydaspes River, King Porus waits, with war elephants. Alexander's horses refuse to charge against elephants. Alexander changes tactics. His infantry and archers target the elephants and their riders. Wounded and confused, the animals panic and begin trampling their own lines. Porus is defeated. But Alexander treats him with respect. He lets him remain king as a vassal. Then Alexander wants to push on, further, more. But his army does not. These men have fought for 8 years. They are thousands of miles from home. Many no longer remember what their children look like. At the Hyphasis River, they refuse to march. No armed mutiny, just a wall of silence. Not a single soldier moves. Alexander tries for 3 days to convince them. He gives speeches, he threatens, he appeals. Nothing works. For the first and only time in his life, Alexander backs down. He has 12 enormous altars built, marking the easternmost point of his empire. Then he turns around. Eyewitnesses report he weeps, not from grief, from rage. Alexander returns to Babylon. He is already planning the next campaign, Arabia. But then, in June 323 BC, he falls ill. What exactly happens remains unresolved to this day. The ancient sources contradict each other. What is certain, he drinks heavily at a dinner. The next day, he has a fever. The fever rises over days. After 12 days, he is dead. He is 32 years old. Since then, historians and physicians have argued over the cause. The natural explanation, typhoid, combined with liver failure from chronic heavy drinking. The Euphrates River in Babylon was contaminated. The symptoms fit. The other explanation, poison. A cup of wine that worked too quickly. Generals who knew, when Alexander dies, they divide the empire among themselves, which is exactly what they did. In 2019, a medical study raised a different angle. Alexander's body reportedly showed no signs of decomposition for 6 days after death. Some physicians interpret this as a sign of Guillain-Barré syndrome, a neurological condition in which patients appear unconscious but are still alive. The theory, Alexander was still alive when he was buried. None of these theories has been proven. None has been disproven. That is the final mystery of a man who spent his entire life creating them. Alexander the Great leaves behind no stable empire. His generals, the Diadochi, tear it apart in decades of war. But what he does leave behind is something else entirely. He spreads the Greek language and culture from Egypt to India. Hellenism, the fusion of Greek and Oriental culture, shapes the next 300 years. Without him, no Hellenistic Egypt, no Greek-influenced Judea, no cultural soil in which Christianity could later take root. He founds Alexandria. Its library becomes the knowledge center of the ancient world. He opens the Silk Road. Greek merchants follow his routes into Central Asia. Caesar wept when he saw a statue of Alexander at age 33, because Alexander had already changed the world at that age. Napoleon studied his battles. His tactics are still taught at military academies today. But the real question remains, was Alexander great? Yes, if you measure greatness by impact. Was he good? That is harder. He destroyed cities, enslaved people, killed a friend with his own hands. He declared himself a god, and some historians believe, by the end, he believed it himself. He was 20 when he began conquering the world, 32 when he died. And in those 12 years, he changed more than most people do in 100 lifetimes. Whether that is greatness or madness, or both at once, every generation answers that question for itself. Alexander the Great, God, murderer, legend. The next legend and their incredible story are already waiting for you. Hit the link below and don't forget to subscribe and leave a like.